Hey guys, it's me, Rant, back with another video. This is going to be part 3 to my gentrification video series, whatever. A lot of people have been asking me to make a part 3 where I talk a little bit about some solutions to gentrification and just some things, what can be done to kind of push back. It's really hard to say solutions, It's really hard to say solutions to gentrification because it's such an all-encompassing force, of neocolonialism, of displacement, of violence. And a lot of people feel like there's nothing that can be done to kind of push back, but there are some things that can be done to push back. And actually people in cities, Black people and Hispanics and Latinos in cities all over the country are really kind of coming together and organizing to try to push back against gentrification. There's a lot of organizing happening in New York, in Brooklyn, in DC, in Philadelphia. They're doing some really interesting things in New Orleans, and a lot of them have, in New Orleans, lots of legislature is being moved out and zoning and things like that. So there are things that can be done. I have 3 main things that I feel like pretty much anyone can do. Well, more or less. The first way, and the easiest way, but at the same time the most difficult way to fight back against gentrification is by owning. It's the easiest way to fight back because it's much harder to displace someone that owns where they live. If you own your apartment, if you own your house, it's that much harder to displace you. However, for Black people in this country that have systemically been redlined, disenfranchised, denied loans and denied capital and denied the ability to own homes, that's very, very difficult for us. So owning is the best in terms of fighting back against gentrification, but for a lot of people, owning is simply impossible. But for the up-and-coming generations, we really need to start having these conversations with, amongst ourselves, for all of us in our mid to late 20s, and with the kids that are coming up, that it is very important to own. Owning a home and owning property is one of the single most important tenets of wealth building. Having property that can accumulate value, that you can pass down the line, is a huge part of wealth building. So we really need to start thinking a lot more about the importance of owning instead of renting. And ways that we can go about owning. For example, a lot of the big banks, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, have all been found guilty of redlining. Wells Fargo actually had to pay hundreds of millions of dollars in settlements in 2012 for being found guilty of redlining Blacks and Hispanics. So I would also recommend that you try to patronize a Black-owned bank. There are Black-owned banks in New York. There's some in DC, Florida, I believe in Chicago. I'll find a list. I'll include one in the description box. And lots of Black-owned banks do give out small loans, small business loans, home loans. So even if, you don't necessarily have to go to like one of the big banks that will probably discriminate against you. You can possibly get one from a Black-owned bank in your community. A lot of people are also coming together to buy property all together. So instead of, one family struggling to buy a house, maybe a couple of families or 2 or 3 families try to get together. They try to pool their resources and see what they can come up with. And you also have, these places where what the white people are doing is taking advantage of low rents in places like New Orleans and places like Detroit. So you can also have people that can come together and maybe pool their resources and come up with $5,000 amongst them to buy property. I actually, someone reached out to me on Instagram, a realtor, saying like, hey, I do have property for sale in Detroit. So I will also include that information in the description box as well for anyone that's interested in possibly buying in Detroit. So we can, we have to start thinking about alternative ways to own, but I know that's really, 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 really hard. Like, trust me, I know. So the second thing that I feel like is really, really, really important, and this is something that everybody really can do, is know your rights. Know your rights. oftentimes we feel like these people come in, and these white people and these land developers and these landlords, they come in and they serve us these notices, or they tell us the rent is getting raised, and we feel like there's nothing we can do. Either we can pay it or we move. But we have to know our rights. Owners have rights, and tenants, renters, also have rights. And in most American cities, there are laws and regulations on how much the rent can be hiked up in 1 year, how much the property taxes can be raised in 1 year. There's it's not, this is not a feudal system. This is not a free-for-all where, the landlord can just come and tell you, well, I'm jacking up your rent by 3,000% and you have to move out. Story time. When I was living in New York, my very first apartment that I lived in out of college was a 4-bedroom, which really meant it was a 3-bedroom with the closet that someone was renting, because the closet was big enough to get a bed in there. It was a room right by the front door. It was obviously meant to be a coat closet or something like that, but a bed could fit in there, so the apartment was marketed as a 4-bedroom, 1 bathroom. So it was me and I had 3 roommates. So it was the 4 of us living in this apartment in Harlem. I was subleasing, so there was 1 girl's name on the lease, and the rest of us were subleasing our rooms. So the girl whose name was on the lease, she became cool with the superintendent, and the superintendent let it slip that the rent that we were paying was like double or triple what the rent had been the year before for the previous tenants. So we took him to city court because you're not allowed to do that. Like, there is a rate, there is a percentage that you're supposed to be able to raise the rent in a year. So we ended up taking him to city court for the time that and we took him to court ourselves. You don't have to hire a lawyer. You don't have to, you can take people to city court yourself. You can do the research yourself. You can learn your rights, know your rights, and take your landlord to city court yourself. So we ended up taking him to city court. While our case was being seen in court, we did not have to pay rent. Our rent was frozen. He ended up being found guilty of illegally raising the rent. So our rent dropped substantially, and he had to pay us back for money. I can't think of what it's called right now, but there's a word for it. And I just can't think of what it's called, but there's a word for it where they have to pay you back money, right? So no, and we were renters. We didn't own that apartment or anything. We were renters. Renters have rights. Owners also have rights, like I said before, with the property taxes and things like that. Know your tenants' rights. Know your ownership rights. Know, if a landlord serves you with a notice saying you have to move out in 180 days, really go look. Pretty much all of the information about housing is available nowadays on the internet. So go look. Is that actually legal? Can they actually tell you to do that? Can they kick you out? And of course it varies from state to state and city to city, which is why I'm saying go look at the codes for where you live. Are they required to provide alternative housing? Because in some cities and states, if they serve you a notice saying, in 180 days you have to move out because they're raising the rent, there are some places that require them to provide you with alternative housing. Know your rights. Know your rights. It's very, 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 very important. And a lot of us feel like we don't have rights and that these people can just run roughshod all over us. And that is just not true. Third thing is strength in numbers. We need to stick together. We can't keep having this mindset of, I live in my house, you live in your house, you live in your house, you live in your house. We bemoan, the loss of our communities, but a lot of us don't come together as a community to fight back against the gentrification, and we also have to start doing that. That's what a lot of people are doing, in their cities, and a lot of people are seeing the results, as a community. Pay attention to when they're having neighborhood meetings. Pay attention to when they're having city council meetings, and everybody go in together as a group and say, listen, as a community, this is how we feel. We're putting our foot down. We are saying no, and protest. There have been a lot of protests going on, especially out in California, in the Bay Area, and cities like Oakland, where the Black Panther Party was founded, that are now becoming predominantly white. You have whole communities that are coming out to protest. They're coming out to protest price hikes. They're protesting in front of people's houses, okay? The gentrifiers, the settlers, the displacers, they're going out and protesting in front of people's houses. And I've said this in other videos, don't let these people come into our communities and just be comfortable and just feel like, again, like they can run roughshod all over us and they can just kick us out. Like, no, like, protest, stick together, let it be known that we're not going to stand for this. Again, attend the neighborhood meetings, attend the city council meetings. A lot of times nowadays, all these type of meetings and things like that are posted online on the internet. So a lot of the older people in the community or the poorer people in the community that don't have a computer or access to the internet or whatever don't know about it. So maybe you elect one person to be the head of your, whatever your community group, and they keep an eye out, so they let everyone know, like, oh, hey, we have a community meeting, council meeting coming up where we're going to vote on if they're going to allow, the Trader Joe's or something like that, because a lot of these places, they do have neighborhood meetings, they have votes, but people don't know about it, they don't attend, they don't show up. So we have to stick together. There's strength in numbers, and we have to show up and show out and know our rights. It's super duper important to know your rights, because again, you don't know what's legal and illegal and what you can and can't fight back against if you don't know your rights. So in the description box, there's going to be lots of different links and articles and resources on ways to combat gentrification. But I want to point out some specific cases of people fighting back against gentrification. One that I want to talk about was a really, really, really important ruling that happened in Washington, D.C., where I'm from, in the 70s, in the Adams-Morgan area, where pretty much the same thing that we see happening now in the city was happening there in Adams-Morgan. The black people felt like they were being redlined, they were being denied home loans, the rent was being hiked up, they were being pushed out of their own neighborhood. So basically what they decided to do was they formed a community group called the Adams-Morgan Organization, and they launched the group with a mission to help renters purchase their homes at a fair rate and to push back against the displacement. One of the leaders, a guy named Frank Smith, he said, black people and poor people should not have to move every time somebody decides they don't want to live in the suburbs anymore. And that's really what it is. Black people and poor people shouldn't have to get up and move and displace their communities every time white people decide they're sick of whatever bullshit ass life they're leading, and they want to live a different type of life. They don't want to live in the suburbs, so they want to come back to the city, so now we have to move. They don't want to live in the city, so they decide to go back to the suburbs, so now we have to move. This is not a pendulum where our lives revolve around white opinions of where they want to live. We really have to start saying, no, you cannot displace us. You cannot displace us. We're here. So basically what ended up happening was this group, the Adams-Morgan Organization, they did research, they learned their rights, and they found out that there was a loophole in the rent laws in Washington, D.C. And basically, the law was called the right to first refusal clause. And basically what it meant was, under the legislature, if a landlord decided to sell a house or raise the rent, tenants had the right to match the offer for the property and purchase it. So they're able to say, hey, well, before you raise the rent, this is the value of the apartment. This is the value of the house. This is the value, and I want to match it. And they can't say no. They can't say well, no, you have to go. You have to go so that I can renovate and sell it for 5 times the amount. They can't do that. There is a law giving people this right to buy. So basically this group came together. They said, we're going to pool our resources and we're going to try to find a way to buy some of these properties, right? So they ended up filing lawsuits against the developers, and the government, the DC government, the local government ended up conducting investigations into what was going on in the area, and it revealed hundreds of violations, right? That basically they were breaking the law. They were raising people's rents illegally. They were raising people's property values illegally. They were serving these eviction notices and kicking people out of their homes and displacing them illegally, and the transactions got frozen, and the people ended up getting the ability to buy their homes. You have to know your rights. You have to know your rights. We have to know our rights, and a lot of us just go along in this bubble like we don't have any rights, because that's really what white supremacy wants us to think, that we don't have any rights, but we do. We really do. And again, you don't necessarily have to hire a lawyer and pay money out the ass for that. You can, with the internet, you can go online, you can look up the codes. Hey, it says right there, he's not allowed to raise my rent more than 3%. in 12 months, and he's trying to jack my rent up and displace me, and that is illegal, right? Know your rights. I also want to read, I want to tell you guys about some stuff that they're doing in New Orleans. As I said in my other gentrification video, my gentrification part 2 video, when I was reading that article about how basically what they're trying to do is completely remake New Orleans and like keep all the black people and the poor people from coming back to the city, that you have people that are fighting back against that, saying like, this is not right, like this is not appropriate, this is illegal, like you can't do this. So what their city council is doing is they're experimenting with zoning strategies, and they're basically giving developers an incentive to include low-income housing in their projects. So they're giving out money, they're giving out grants, they're giving out loans. They're basically saying like, hey, you want to build a high-rise, you want to get money from the city to help you finance your high-rise, we'll give you more money if you agree to build a low-income property over here, or to include a low-income, or to include several low-income apartments, in your building, things like that. And they also recently, in July of 2015, they approved a rule that basically said that apartment developers can build on smaller lots in exchange for including some units that are set aside for low income. So basically, they're allowed to build more, right? So it's like, you want to build on as much as you possibly can. So if you can build on a smaller lot and build it up, you're able to have more than if they say like, oh no, you're limited to building, on this one bigger piece of property. So they said like, hey, if you want to build on this smaller lot, we'll let you, but you have to make sure that you include low income housing for residents. And they were also doing that in New York as well. They're building all these condos and high rises, so they're doing it so that a lot of them have to include Section 8 like clauses. They have to include low income properties. They're having a lottery. They're having a lottery so that a lot of these, high-rise condos and shit like that, they have to include a certain amount of units that they can give away for free to people that have won a lottery. So there are ways that people are trying, on the legal side, on the city side to fight, and there are also ways that people are trying on the protest side, on the activism side to fight as well. So those are just a few ways that we can fight back against gentrification. Understanding the importance of owning, knowing your rights, and understanding that there's strength in numbers and in sticking together and being aware about what's going on in our neighborhoods. So I'm going to include a link to the government housing development website where they actually have a list of tenant rights by state. So please go check that out and see, what is going on in your state and what type of, rights you have as a renter or as an owner. And, again, I'm going to also include links about some protests and some things that are going on. So based on where you live, if you do see gentrification going on, try and find out, if they have any community organizers, if they have any groups, if they have any, protests, if they're doing any organizing to really, fight back against displacement. And if they don't, like, maybe you can start one, maybe you can start a group, maybe you can get a group of people in your neighborhood together to say, listen, we're going to start all of us together, we're going to start holding neighborhood meetings, we're going to start going to city council meetings, we're going to start protesting, every time they open up a Trader Joe's or a Starbucks, we're going to go have a die-in out in front. We're going to make it really uncomfortable for these displacers, because one of the main tenets of gentrification also is that the people that come in feel like they can just ignore us, like we are not there. That the neighborhood, the community doesn't have a history behind it. It doesn't have any people already living there. That they're Ray Charles to the bullshit. They just come in and they just fucking Columbus and elbow everybody out, and they, just like the fucking dude in Brooklyn said, I settled this place. This is my place now. I don't give a fuck about anybody that was already here. And a huge part of that is the fact that they bring shit in with them to make them feel comfortable. They bring in, a Starbucks or a Trader Joe's, and they push out, the neighborhood bodega to make them feel comfortable. You have to make them uncomfortable. A big protest that's still going on that they still do. They do brunch. It's called brunch something. I can't think of it right now. But basically what they do is they go to different it's a group of protesters that go to different brunch places and they protest. They have die-ins, they yell, they say the names of people that were killed by police. They talk about police brutality. They talk about institutionalized racism. So while these people are trying to have their nice brunch and their mimosas and spend their money up, they have a group of, black and brown bodies mostly right in their faces, making them uncomfortable, saying to them, I will not be ignored. I'm here and I will not be ignored. And that's what a lot of people are also doing to protest this gentrification. They are making these displacers uncomfortable, and they're saying, you know what, enough. You're not just going to come in and kick us out and act like we're not here. No, we're going to fight back. We're going to make you uncomfortable. We're going to bring the fight to you. We're going to protest outside of your house. We're going to protest outside of that new coffee shop. We're going to protest outside of that new deli. We're going to let you know that you can't just come in and displace us like we don't exist. And we're going to know our rights. And we're going to be at these city council meetings. And we're going to be trying to pool our money together to buy our building. And we're going to be trying to get our loans from our black-owned businesses. We're not just going to roll over and let you run roughshod over us anymore, not in 2015. Like, we're done. We're done. So that's gentrification part 3. What are some solutions? Let me know what solutions you guys think can be done to fight gentrification, or what you have done or what you have seen. Again, make sure you check the description box for links and information. And, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Food for thought as always. See you guys next time. Peace.